I'm the Gloucester Clean Community Coordinator, and today we're going to talk about recycling. In nature, recycling is a closed loop system. So you have your barred owl. Say your barred owl dies of old age. What happens to that carcass, to that nature trash? What happens? What happens is decomposers move in. Small animals and bacteria that will eat the carcass, poop it out. The worms and other animals will come and eat that poop and make it into smaller and smaller pieces of poop, and eventually we get what we call soil. And so that soil can become, those nutrients can be pulled up into a plant, and that soil can become another plant or another animal eventually. So that's recycling. It's the same nutrients being recycled over and over again in nature. There's nothing has to be added to that system to make this happen. It's what we call a closed loop system. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out, except maybe in the chemical reactions, some heat is lost, but that's pretty much it. Now, when humans recycle, is that a closed loop system? Is it such a good system? Well, sometimes. The answer is sometimes. So let's take a nice metal can. When this metal can, well, the metal for this can was mined out of the earth at a great expense and costing us a lot of labor, and we burned fossil fuels into vehicle and equipment that we used to pull it out of the ground. But once we get this can out of the ground, we can recycle metals over and over again. They won't lose any structural stability. You can turn this can, when you melt it down, you can turn it right back into another metal can. So that, again, is a closed loop system. Nothing is lost here, and you didn't have to add anything to make that happen. You can just take a metal can, turn it into another metal can over and over and over again forever. So that's why we don't want to put this in the landfill. We want to put this in the recycling bin so we can save money and save labor and turn this back into more metal products. So in the bin it goes. What about, the same thing is true for paper. Paper is also a closed loop recycling system. It's not as perfect as the can. When you recycle paper over and over, you can start with lovely office paper, which is very high quality. And when you recycle that, you have to recycle it into lower quality papers, such as newspaper or cardboard. Because as you to recycle it, you put it in water and soak it and kind of smush it up. And when you do that, the fibers that hold the paper together get shorter and shorter and shorter each time you recycle it. So you can't take beautiful office paper, shiny and white, and turn it into more beautiful, shiny white office paper. It gets less white each time, and eventually it can only be recycled into lesser quality papers, which is fine, because eventually these papers, you can put them in your compost pile, or you could just bury them in the ground and they will turn back into soil, just like our dead owl. So nature knows what to do with paper. It can turn it back into soil, and then the nutrients get put back into our natural system again. So it's a closed loop. Plastic, however, plastic is another story altogether. The way we make plastic, this is not a natural product. You don't find plastic in nature. Humans made this. We make it by taking oil and gas and combining them chemically, like in a lab. And that's how you get this plastic. And now fossil fuels were made to fuel the equipment to make that happen. And now your bottle is also made of fossil fuels. You bring it to the packaging plant, where it gets wrapped in more plastic on the outside and then shipped to the warehouse, burning more fossil fuels. And then from the warehouse, it gets shipped to maybe Walmart and burning more fossil fuels. And then you burn fossil fuels in your car to drive to Walmart to get the pack of water, or in this case, iced tea. And then it takes you, less than a day to drink it. It takes you, depending how thirsty you are, maybe a few minutes. But all those fossil fuels were used all along the chain just to make this plastic bottle, just so you could have a quick drink and then throw it away. So of course you're gonna say, well, I don't throw it away, I put it in the recycling. Here's the thing. Plastic recycling is not perfect. Because we made this product up, it's not a natural product. It doesn't re-enter that natural closed loop system. When you put a water bottle in your recycling bin, it goes to the recycling plant and it gets melted down. But if you want to make that into another plastic bottle, you need to add more oil and gas into that system to make another plastic bottle. Because when you melt down plastics, it doesn't turn back into fossil fuel. It just turns into a plastic sludge, and that plastic sludge or melted plastic can't be turned back into another water bottle that is structurally sound and safe for you to drink out of without adding more fossil fuels into the mix. You can't just turn a water bottle into another water bottle. You have to add more oil and gas. So you've wasted all the fossil fuels to make this in the first place, then you're adding more fossil fuels again to make another plastic bottle. So yes, it's recyclable, but we have to add more fossil fuel, which is of course not perfect and not a best case scenario. So what's a better solution? A better solution, well, first off, just a couple of years ago in China, a scientist discovered a way to turn plastics back into fossil fuels. It's a desktop system, it's a box. You can put any plastic in there, any kind, whether it's recyclable in Gloucester or not. We have lots of different plastics that we use. You can put any plastic into this system and it will turn it into kerosene, which you may recognize as a fossil fuel that we do use a lot. I mean, you might use it in your tractors, you might use it as fuel when you go camping for some of your equipment. So that sounds like a really good solution. Unfortunately, that's just in the initial early stages. It's not a perfect system yet, because you're talking about this is just a small tabletop melting system, and also you have to add a lot of energy to that machinery to melt the plastic down and make it into kerosene. It has to burn at a very, very high temperature. So that's kind of a problem, because why would you spend all this fossil fuel to make this box such a high temperature to melt these plastics down? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's not economically feasible right now. However, I can tell you one thing about scientists: they love to one-up each other. So that's how science works. A scientist discovers something or makes an invention, and then other scientists come along and they improve on that. And then a few years later, somebody else comes along, another scientist, and will improve upon that. And so eventually you get a system that will work and is like the best case scenario. So since this technology is just in its early stages, it's not quite ready for prime time yet. But scientists are coming down the pike working on making this a better system. And I would say maybe in the next 50 years, we'll be able to melt down all of our plastics and make them back into fossil fuels. That's the hope anyway. But 50 years of tossing plastics into the landfill or into the recycling bin is what we're in for, because we're stuck with these plastics that we've become so reliant upon. So what can we do to buy scientists time to work on this problem while using less fossil fuels in our personal lives? One is, instead of buying these single-use plastic bottles, you use it once, you throw it in the bin, or you put it in the trash. Instead of using those, you could buy a bottle that you can refill over and over again. So this one, you could fill with water from your tap, which, if you live in Gloucester, there are about 12 people in Gloucester whose only job is to make sure that you have clean water to drink coming out of your tap. So it's safe to drink. Put it in a reusable water bottle that you can carry around and bring back and forth. And that's also less expensive for your family. Now, eventually, these kind of plastic water bottles will break. So maybe this lasted a year or two before you dropped it on the concrete and it cracked, right? So then it's a plastic number 3. So this is not recyclable in Gloucester. So now it goes to the landfills. Now these fossil fuels have gone to the landfill. But at least you weren't using, 365 days times how many years of single-use water bottles. So you use less plastic. So that's good, right? What's an even better solution? A metal water bottle. You can fill this with that nice clean water from your tap. And when you're done with this aluminum water bottle, you can put this in the recycling bin, knowing that this is a closed loop system, and this metal water bottle can be turned into another metal water bottle or turned into something else made out of aluminum. Who knows? But we know that we're not being wasteful and wasting fossil fuels by using the plastic. Speaking of when you pack your lunch, instead of using Ziploc bags, you can use those plastic reusable containers, take them home and wash them at the end of the day. So instead of using a year's worth of Ziploc bags, 365 Ziploc bags sitting in the landfill because they're not recyclable, then you can use maybe just one plastic container. And when that breaks, put that in the landfill. It takes up a lot less space than 365 Ziploc bags. Or you can choose your snacks accordingly. This orange is naturally packaged. You don't need any plastic for this. You can wrap your sandwich in wax paper like they used to do in the old days. My grandmother used to use wax paper to carry stuff back and forth. And you know what? It still exists. We can still do that. Wax paper is naturally recyclable, just like that dead owl. So you can put it in your compost pile. You can burn it. You can dig a hole and bury it in the ground, and the natural soil microbes will take care of that for you. So when you see that symbol, that triangle symbol where you usually will see the words reduce, reuse, recycle, there's a reason that they say those words in that order. Reduce, meaning use less in the first place. Think about what you're buying. Should you be buying this when you could buy this? Probably not. Buy this. Instead of buying a whole bunch of granola bars wrapped in plastic, buy a bunch of these. So that's the reduce part. The reuse part, as we know, is you can reuse this water bottle over and over and over again. And then as a last resort, then you recycle. That's your last choice. So remember, recycle's last for a reason. Even though it sounds good, it's not perfect.